Hello everybody, Michael from TheTestSmart here. Today I'm going to be taking you through a quick demo of the TestSmart's tool, in particular the test editor page. As you can see, we have the Create Vendor test open right now on version 10.30. On the right side, you have the play button, the save as button if you want to duplicate the test, and then you also have the record button and the delete button. The record button will allow you to add extra steps using the recorder tool. Tests are made up of these building block-like objects, as you can see on the page. So open browser, log into FinOps, go to FinOps module, increment variable, create vendor, etc. Now we split these components into two options. We call them either smart commands or components. So go to FinOps module is what we refer to as a smart command, meaning all the logic behind the scenes is managed by the TestSmart. All you have to provide is this data here, so a path to the module. This makes it really easy to quickly create tests because things like filtering on a column, going to a module, calculations, etc. are really easy to do because the TestSmart has created that logic for you. Now, starting from the top, you always have to open the browser because it is obviously browser testing, web-based testing. Second, in this case, we want to be logging in, so we're using the login to FinOps command, which is managed by the TestSmart. Again, that means that when a new version comes out, the TestSmart will test this command. If we notice that it has changed, then we'll update it so that your tests remain working. Now you see that this login to FinOps command has 4 parameters. So the URL, which is your environment, the company that you want to be logging in with, USMF in this case, username, and password. Right, so any of your tests, you can use the exact same details. As you can see, we're using the variables here, which means that any test we run is probably also going to be using these variables. But maybe you have multiple logins that you want to be using, so you'll just set them up as separate variables. So for example, default username 2. All right, next, go to FinOps module. I just talked about this. We just provide the breadcrumb to get to that, and the test knows how to deal with that. It'll deal with things like errors, collapsing sections, making sure that each module is visible. Let's skip over this command for now and just go to create vendor. I'll come back to this because it's relative to this component. So create vendor is a really easy way to obviously create the vendor. We can actually go into this component and see what it's doing. So it's pressing new menu. It's pressing cancel if that button's present. So I believe that's used for the vendor templates. This one's very important. It's a command called expand all sections, essentially making sure that all the fields we're interacting with down here are going to be visible by making sure that the fast tabs or sections, whatever you call them, are expanded. All right. So in this particular case, with this create vendor, we're entering this data. So the vendor account, we're using this variable. The name, we're using this variable. The group, we're using this variable. And then afterwards, we're pressing save. The good thing about these components is you might have 20 different variations of a create vendor test. Each of those tests can use the same component, but the data they actually use to fill in the forms for that vendor can be different. So anything you see on the front of the component here, for example, these fields, this data, is relevant only to this create vendor test. Now, if I open this test up, these fields here that are not marked in yellow are relevant for every test. So every test you add this component to is going to have these exact same steps. Now, this is really helpful because let's say you have 10 create vendor tests, you update and you find that finance and operations changed the interactions required to create a vendor. So maybe you have to press new menu and then there's like an additional form you have to go through. Rather than changing all 10 of those tests manually, you can just change it once in this component, press save, and it's going to be reflected on all of those tests. In this case, I'm using it in 4. If you're using it in 10, obviously it would say 10. Likewise, there's a question mark up here. You can actually select this and it will tell you which test this component is used in. All right, coming back to this command here, increment FinOps variable. And you can see the variable name is current vendor. So we actually do this because the vendor account has to be unique each time. So there's a few ways to do it. Maybe we want to create a unique number, but we found that it's easier just to increment each time, and there's less chance of you accidentally using the same account number if you do it with this method. So if I hover over this, you see it's a bit of a long name, but it's inv ven 00338. So the next time I run it, it will be 339, 340, etc. Now I won't go through all these components, but I will just scroll down so you can see how we've made this test up. So vendor add address, add contact details. This one's actually using our smart command for tables. So you define a row. As you can see here, we're adding 2 rows, and then you define the data that you want to enter into those rows. And again, it's a smart command, so all the difficult table logic is done behind the scenes by the TestSmart. We've programmed that in for you. So it knows where to find, for example, the add line button. It knows whether it needs to append or delete. Right, so it's a relatively short test, but by using these components, it breaks it up nicely and makes it really, really easy to read. And when we get to the end of it, we save and close, we close browser, and the test is complete. Now, if I wanted to edit this test, let's say on the create vendor form, I wanted to add a new field. That's also very simple. So let's say we want to type into address field, address 123. I would then press save, run the test, and it's going to essentially find the field called address and put this value in. Really, really straightforward. I can also add my own components at any point using our component picker. You just type the name of the component or use those section drop-downs. You have a list of components that the TestSmart has shared with you, and you can drag and drop those in, configure them, and run your test. All right, so that's the basics of the TestSmart's editor page. Hope you enjoyed. I'll be sure to release a few more videos showing other features like the live playback of a test, adding to test plan, the variables page, schedule, things like that. Thank you.